Wake the dead.
Wake the dead! Wake the dead!
With Sean McCann. Greetings and welcome to Wake the Dead. Today we are blessed to have returning guest Jerry Marzinsky, and he has brought a friend, Miss Lynn Monet. You listeners are very familiar with Jerry, I'm sure, if you've listened to our past episodes. He is an infinite well of interesting information, and he is gracious enough to bring many of his friends and acquaintances to share their experiences and to share with our listeners the expanded realms of understanding that he has experienced and has glimpsed. And we are very pleased to have you here again, Jerry. Welcome.
It's good to be on again. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to do a little summary here because Lynn is going to come at this from another angle that it dovetails what I've discovered on the front lines. So, I've been working on the front lines for close to 40 years. I've worked in the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet. I've worked in mental health centers. I've worked in private psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in the psych department of a large state prison with the criminally insane. I spent 10 years working in hospital emergency rooms doing psych crisis. And I now have a private practice working with all kinds of people all over the planet. So, I've seen it all. And the entire time I've been studying the voices that schizophrenics hear. And the psychiatric mafia insists that these are hallucinations, but they run well-defined, repeatable, predictable patterns. And if they do that, they can't be hallucinations.
Right.
Now, I've spoken about those patterns before, I believe, and we've posted them on my website. So you can go there and see for yourself.
Your website, can you repeat that for the listeners, please?
It's at jerrymarzinsky.com. It's somewhere. Those patterns are somewhere on that website.
Right.
But, what the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia have done is they've kept kicking up this fairy tale they made up about the voices being hallucinations. They've got no studies to back that. They've not done any. They just kind of walked up on the stage with their diplomas and went, "We hereby declare," right. Just like the old Egyptian priests of old, "We declare the voices are hallucinations because we said so." They haven't done any studies on it whatsoever. They have no backing for it whatsoever.
And they choose not to do any studies.
And they choose not to do any studies because anybody who did studies on a hallucination would look like a wacko. So they got it pretty well locked up.
Right.
But when I first went to work at the state hospital, I could see that these voices were driving these people to do bad things, and they would say, "Oh, the voices told me to do it. The voices told me to do it," But when I went to study the voices and the psychiatrists found out at the state hospital, I was ordered not to. They told me, "You're making these people sicker by asking them about these hallucinations, and you're reinforcing the hallucinations." By then I knew that was a bunch of crap. So, they started off with blaming mothers for schizophrenia. That was easy to debunk.
Right.
So they moved it up into genetics. So now the average person, the clinician on the front line, the psychiatrist, can't debunk that because now you need a genetics degree and you need laboratories and all that kind of stuff. So they moved it up out of the observable path of the mass of humanity and put it up where only a very small fraction of the population could verify what they were saying.
Right.
And that went on for years.
In so doing, it's also saying it's because we say so, because we're the doctors and we know, so again, you just have to agree and comply with the same priests. They just wear white coats instead of the Egyptian garb of old days, you know.
Right. And
Right.
how's the average psychiatrist or doctor or clinician going to go up and say that you're full of crap? You know,
Yeah,
you
they'd
don't
lose
have
their
a
job,
genetics
right?
lab. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 they'd go after it. And you don't have a genetics lab. You don't have anything to back what they're saying or to counter what they're saying. But
right,
thank heavens, there are some geneticists that weren't under control of big pharma in the universities, and they debunked the genetics thing. You know, so
awesome,
they blew it out of the water. So then they moved it again. So now it was the chemical imbalance theory. You know, it's like, oh yeah, there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that's what causes it. Well, when I went to work at the psychiatrist at the big state hospital, the first thing I saw was these psychiatrists were prescribing drugs without any baseline. There was no test to
right,
test for what is the baseline of this, you know, what is out of balance? How much is it out of balance? Which of the 23 or so neurotransmitters are out of balance? And what is out of balance mean?
right,
I found out later that they have no tests for that.
right,
They don't even know what the chemical imbalance of the brain should be. It was
right,
completely fabricated. It was totally made up. It was a bunch of crap that they fed to the public.
right. And
You know,
and the psychiatrists that do the prescribing, they know there is no test, and that there is, you know, they understand that it's just imaginary idea, but they still go along with it as if it's truth. I think we did an episode about psychiatry, psychiatrists, and the whole phenomenon where we played a clip outside of a psychiatrist's convention, and there was a guy on the street asking them, you know, about the chemical imbalance. Does chemical imbalance exist? They're like, no, we don't know. It's just, you know, and
well, the
like that's
honest
how
ones will
that's what
say
they
that.
operate. Yeah, those are the ones that were
You know, the
included.
honest ones, the other ones, they're brainwashed
But they still
by,
operate as if it's true, and you know, they still comply with
well,
the authority.
they have to look like they know what's going on.
Right.
So if they don't know what's going on, they just make something up. You know, that's what they've done, just like their DSM. Totally made up, totally fabricated.
Yeah.
There's not one solid test to
Right.
verify any of those diagnoses.
Yeah, and
They're all
the diagnostic statistics manual is like the leading edge of what the future of how they think for mental illness. Like, they have the diagnostic statistics manual has stated in the past that pedophilia is just another attracted, like people, homosexual, heterosexual, pedophile. It's, you know, it's whatever. It's just how the brain works. And then everybody got mad, and then they were like, okay, wait, and then they erased it out of there again. Because they're trying to push these things with the DSM, and then the doctors follow the DSM. That's like the leading edge, is what I'm saying.
well, they follow the DSM because the insurance companies will pay for, you know, these numbers that they put down there. But I've heard that they make up these diagnoses, and one psychiatrist says it's like a tobacco barn in there. They meet every few years, and the guy comes in, hey, I got a new diagnosis. It's this, and then they all vote on it, and then they vote out the ones that are not, you know, doing so well.
Yeah.
You know, so 3/4 of that group that makes up these diagnoses are in league with big pharma.
Right.
You know, so it's a one big cartel.
Right. Just like government, just like
government.
Everything the past 2 or 3 years of, you know, all the tyranny that we've been dealing with, it's all one big piece that's crushing us. You know, like we are being attacked on all levels by the same cult. But
that's it, right? It's the pharmaceutical branch of the deep state,
right?
You know, so and it all revolves about money. You know, our
money
entire
is the fuel
Western,
which keeps it going, right?
Yeah. Yep. The money and the drugs. Our whole mental health system is one drug-fueled merry-go-round. None of those drugs that they've come up with cure anything.
No.
Nothing.
All they do is damage the brain. Right.
That's right. Especially the antipsychotics are some of the most dangerous drugs.
Neuroleptics
Right. They're some of the most dangerous drugs ever produced and used in medicine. Right. And these neuroleptics, they actually found with long-term use with and I've seen this in the state hospital where they do what they call the Thorazine shuffle, where they can no longer walk with a normal gait
Right.
because their nervous system is so destroyed.
Right.
And what psychiatry does is when those neurological symptoms start appearing, they don't back down on those things. They will give them cogentin to cover up those symptoms, and it will continue until the person is completely destroyed.
Right.
These people are unbelievable what they're
Yeah.
doing.
And the listeners can think of, like, you've probably seen video of people in mental hospitals and everybody's shaking, like they can't, like, to try to hold a plate or a dish and it's just spilling, and because their bodies are damaged completely, their brains. And like he said, the other drug masks the damage, so the damage is still happening, but it's not visible.
Yeah,
So that when that other
they can't experience it.
Right. So when that
and
other drug ceases, then the damage is even worse than before. Right.
right, and psychiatry is aware of that. Now, what they found with was that a lot of these when they started doing autopsies on these patients who died, these psych patients who died in the psych hospitals, they found that their brains were shrunk and rotted out like walnuts.
Ugh.
And they linked that to these antipsychotic drugs. And of course, the
Right.
pharmaceutical industry jumps up and goes, "Oh no, it's not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia did that.
Right,
The
right.
schizophrenia,
It's
whatever
a
the
genetic
schizophrenia
thing.
is."
Like,
Yeah,
it would have happened anyway, right? Okay.
you're right. You're right. It's whatever the schizophrenia is did that. So
Mhm.
some of these
That way
researchers
they
that
don't
were
have to pay for all the damage they've done to all the
right, and
people.
it's
And
amazing they're not having the Dickens sued out of them by people. You
they
know,
should. Yeah, it should happen.
so they tried to deny that, but some of the more honest researchers started feeding these antipsychotics to monkeys and rats, and found that the same thing was happening.
Right.
It is destroying their brains with long-term use. It destroys and rots out the peripheral nervous system. It does permanent neurological damage. And I've never seen a psychiatrist tell a single patient that ever in the
Right.
40 years I've been working on the front lines. They'll
Right.
say, "Oh, and it'll make your vision a little blurry. Your speech may be a little slurred. You may have some sexual dysfunction, but yeah, don't worry about that. You'll get over it in 2 weeks." No, these drugs are destroying their nervous systems,
Right.
and
And
they will not tell them.
that's the MO of pretty much all doctors. You know what I mean? Like, even, if you got a new baby and the doctors want to circumcise them, they're just gonna be like, "Oh, it's just a little bit of pain." They don't even feel it. "Oh, this or whatever," and they don't give you full. They don't tell you what's actually happening. They're like, "Oh, they signed the thing that said, oh, it was, we told them what are the possibilities of the damage, but really it's all damage. Like, the drugs do damage. That's their intent. The same thing with circumcision or whatever else they're trying to do. They're trying to damage us. Like, if you look at the big cult and you look at the other aspects of it, the other wings of it, like government or some religions, and like these are power structures meant to neuter us, to keep us weak and sick, so that we can never rebel. We can never think, maybe I shouldn't follow order. We should, so that way we are just kept slaves, cattle. And that's where they want to put us as humanity. So of course, like, they want these drugs that shrivel up our brains into walnuts. They that's an effective tool for them, because then we aren't going to be causing we're not going to be a rabble rouser. We're just going to be in the corner drooling.
Yeah,
That's what
when
they
you're
want.
drugged out of your skull, you're
Yeah.
not thinking straight. So the whole Western mental health system is a drug fueled merry-go-round.
Yeah.
It just goes round and round and round. What happens is they bring these psychotic or mentally ill people into the hospital. They keep them until their insurance runs out. They
Right.
fill them full of drugs. They give them 2 weeks worth and send them on their way to an outpatient psychiatrist somewhere.
Mhm.
They get sick from the side effects because the side effects are awful. And then they eventually quit. They go psychotic again. They come back in. They drug them back up again.
Right.
And it just goes round and round and round. Each time they're extracting, $7,000 to $10,000 from the insurance system to keep this thing going.
Right.
Nobody's being cured. Nobody's being fixed. Those drugs aren't doing anything. And let's look at the results of the Western mental health system here. Last year, 46,000 Americans killed themselves.
Wow.
46,000. That's almost as many who died in Vietnam
In 1 year.
in 1 year.
Jesus.
And most of them are on some kind of psychiatric drug. From 1999 to 2019, the suicide rate increased 33%.
Gee.
And this is with our whole society being awash in psychiatric drugs, psychiatrists all over the place, mental health hospitals pumping people full of these drugs.
Right.
You know, between schizophrenics, suicide at a rate to 3 to 5 times above the general population. You know, but what's interesting is so do psychiatrists.
Right.
Psychiatrists have a suicide rate virtually exactly the same as schizophrenics.
Mm. That's interesting in itself, and we've talked about that on other shows. And just, I mean, because they are afflicted by the demons also. Like the demons affect the patient, and then the patient affects the doctor. You know. And I'm wondering if maybe there's a trickle down effect of the demon, because the demon will tell the person, "You suck, you should kill yourself," and then maybe that trickles through. Maybe the demons are able to affect the doctor's, self.
Well, I know they don't like the doctors, because
That's for sure.
The assault rate by psychotics on psychiatrists is much higher than any other doctor or nurse. I mean, so psychiatrists are getting the crap kicked out of them by these people, because the voices don't like those drugs. The voices want these people upset so they can feed off of that negative emotional energy. And those drugs are major tranquilizers. So they don't like them. And they don't like the people who dish them out.
Right. And so they tell the victim, I get the psychotic, "Oh, you don't want to take these drugs because it gives you sexual dysfunction. Don't you want to go have a girlfriend?" And so it convinces the person, "I need to stop this drug," even though the doctor says it's a good thing. Like they fall in with the voice instead, because the voice is constant, and it's,
And Lynn, jump in anywhere in here.
Yes, welcome, Lynn. I'm sorry.
Don't feel like you're sealed out. Just jump in when you want. So
that's okay. I'm just listening to all of this, and I agree with all of it. Yeah, definitely. They do interfere. They like to get the people off of their medication, because they like to create that rippling effect throughout the family thread, that they feed off the negativity of the job loss and the
Do they feed on the
entire family?
Do they feed on the other family members too?
Yes.
Without speaking to them, they can still.
Yeah.
They can draw on their energy. They love the negative energy, the negative emotion. So if somebody's having a negative emotion, say anger or sorrow or disappointment, they definitely latch onto that, because it puffs them up and it enables them to do more physical acts.
Right. So they pour gasoline on the fire. When there's an upset in the family, they just come in there, pour gasoline, and light the whole family on fire and feed off of the whole family.
That's true.
I think I've experienced this.
It's very true.
I mean, if they cause someone to end their own life, they can feed on the mom and the dad and the sister and the brother and everybody that's crying. They can go and feed, and they don't have to use their voice. They can just feed, because it's
they
there
don't have
and
to use any energy. That's kind of like if somebody gets into the prison.
Yeah.
It's such a paranoid, fearful environment that all they need to do is just keep setting things off. They don't have to work very hard to feed in a prison.
Right. Like a prison is like a candy store for these guys.
For them, yeah. They want people in prison. But with psychiatry, one of the big things that the voices use against psychiatrists is they tell the patient that the psychiatrist is poisoning them, and they point to the side effects.
I mean, it is true,
and it is true.
Yeah.
So they point to the side effects of the medication and go, "Look, see for yourself. You've got these nervous tics. You can't sleep. All this stuff's happening in your body. You're being poisoned.
Right.
Why don't you sock that guy in the face? Get away from him."
Exactly.
Why don't you stab that Dr. Jerry guy next time you see him? That was a hell of a story you told us before.
Oh yeah, that was one.
Please, Lynn, continue.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
The thing is too is there's a difference between in the mental facilities between people with addiction in people with schizophrenia. There are attachments for both. They are different kinds of attachments. And if you'd like me to tell the story, Dr. Jerry, you've already heard about the young lady. I went back to college to further my nursing degree. I've been a nurse for 38 years. And of course, we had to do a rotation through the psychiatric ward. I have the gift of second sight. That's a whole nother show and story. But I do have that. And when we went into the psychiatric ward, we went into the area where that is the intake area. And of course, there were 8 nurses and 1 teacher. The teacher had gone to get the assignments for us. And there was this one young woman, looked like in her early 20s, maybe 20, 21 years old. And of course, she's starting to get that Thorazine shuffle, and the way she's talking, her tongue sounds thick, the way that they sound. And she points at me and she says, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, I'm like, oh my God, I hope she's not talking to me. You know, I wanted to be Lynn, the student nurse that day, not Lynn, the weirdo. So I was kind of looking over her shoulder, hoping that she was talking to somebody standing behind me. And then the teacher came along and she shuffled us out saying, "Don't make any eye contact." This area was violent.
That's so bizarre. That's so bizarre. Don't make any eye contact. It's like they're fostering the fear right off the bat. These people are dangerous, you know?
And they're separating them, like they're not letting them have a human connection with anybody.
Right.
Like
parasites.
Like they're in prison.
Yeah,
parasites,
they're animals. So you got to be careful. They're vicious animals. Don't
us and them. Right. Look at them as other. Right. Yeah.
We even had to sign papers that if we got hit in the head with something or bitten by somebody, that we couldn't hold the facility responsible. So
that's why they won't let researchers in there. They won't allow a researcher because they scare them half to death. No, you got to sign all these papers. You might get hurt. You know, it's bullcrap. It's just bullcrap. I've worked in all kinds of psych wards. You know, if you don't do something to provoke them, you're going to be okay.
Right. But like with anybody, you know,
like with anybody.
Yeah, exactly. You treat them with respect and things are going to go better for you. The thing is that this particular day, I was then reassigned back to that intake area with a fellow nurse. There were 2 of us. We were both sitting there were picnic tables that were bolted to the floor. We were sitting at the picnic tables inside of the room, and the young lady that had originally approached us came over, and she sat down with us, and she started to talk about the fact that she had been molested at age 10 by their pastor through age 14. And then her mother got remarried, and the stepdad was then raping her until she ran away at 16. And then she got into devil worship, and she said that she realized that wasn't something that she felt that she should have been doing. And as I'm sitting there looking at her, this woman is covered in claw marks. She's got she was wearing a spaghetti strap top, kind of tank top type thing. She had on short shorts, her abdomen was showing. And previously I had an experience with a haunted house that I had purchased that I was never able to move into. And a friend of mine got clawed to the point of bleeding while she stood next to me in that kitchen on her back and stomach. So I recognized the claw marks on this young woman as the same as the ones that my friend had. And they look like a cat scratch. She had them coming out of her ears, coming out of her nose. I mean, she had them angled and scratched in places on her skin that there is no way that she could have done it herself unless she had been some kind of a contortionist. She was even talking about one of the ones that had a very long nail that was scratching her on the inside of her female parts. And the facility was claiming that she was doing it to herself. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this woman. I'm like, oh my God. You know, she's covered in these claw marks, and she was called away at that time because they have different times where they all go for meeting with their therapists or sitting in groups or different things like that. And she was called away for hers. And as she got up to walk away, because I have second sight, as she started to walk away, it appeared as if she had like a Santa Claus bag over each shoulder that was about the size of a standard pillowcase. I'm saying clear, there was really no sack to it, but I don't know how else to describe it because they were clustered together like grapes. And they looked like misshapen potatoes. Some of them were inverted. You could see the eyes on the bottom and the mouth on top. And as she's walking away, I can see one of these over each of her shoulders. And I'm like, oh my God, that woman really is hearing 25 different voices. She's got attachments on her back.
So she admitted to hearing voices.
Yeah, she said that she heard 25 different voices, and which I could see all the heads. These were disembodied spirits that either hadn't crossed over and were hitching a free ride, or a few of them that had a good thing going because, you know, they could feed off of her and the negativity that her illness and some of her belief system were feeding into, you know. And so it just, yeah, she did. So what happened is when she returned from her meeting, it was about 45 minutes later, I saw her walking to her room, and I walked to her room and I knocked on the door frame and she let me come in. And I said to her, I said, you know, I've got something that I need to tell you. I said, and if you repeat this to anybody, they're going to think you're crazy and they're going to keep you here longer. I said, but you do have attachments on your back. I said, I believe that you are hearing the 25 different voices. The thing is that her face kind of got disgruntled and she turned to walk away from me. And as she did, I don't know what came over me. At that time, I had my own personal things going on. I didn't feel strong enough I do take them off of people now, but I didn't feel strong enough removing them from her because I didn't want them following me home. Because usually there's a prayer and a ritual and type things that you do to protect yourself from that. But anyway, she turned. And the things were hooked on her shoulders with this brownish tan looking almost horn type thing that was twisted almost like a grapevine. And that was like a C clasp underneath her arm and at the top of the shoulders. It didn't go all the way around her shoulders. So I took my fingers and I got them underneath and I lifted them off, and she turned around, and of course they were falling to the ground. They started to separate at that point. I was trying to step them into the ground. A few of them rolled out underneath her bed, and she said, it felt like you were pulling grass off my back. Now, she didn't know that I was pulling them off of her. And her face completely changed from that contorted look to more normal, and her skin even started to pink up. But she turned around and she said, you know, it felt like you were pulling grass off of my back. So she actually energetically felt that coming away. And I explained to her, I said, look, this is a temporary fix. I said, this is not a guaranteed thing. A few of them have rolled off. There's some near your bed. I'm sure that there's some in your home. But when you get out of here, you need to find someone that can help you remove these things from you permanently and out of your environment. And I said, again, if you repeat this to anybody, they're going to keep you here longer, and you need to get out of here. I kid you not. About a year later, I'm in Walmart. I'm squatting down, look at candles in the candle aisle, and I see these two young women at the end of the aisle turning and looking at me, and I'm thinking, God, you know, I'm looking for toilet paper stuck to my shoe, maybe my zipper's down, you know, all of the logical things. And I overhear the one girl saying, well, I'm sure that it's her. I'm going to go say something. I'm like, oh, she must have read my books. You know, it's a fan. But she came over, and I stood up and she said, do you remember me? And she looked so different. I mean, when I saw her in the facility, she was a little bit heavier. She had real short hair. Her skin was very, very pasty, and of course, she was on medication, so she was very thick-tongued and things like that. Here she was with this gorgeous blonde bob and her makeup on, and she was dressed nice. And she said, I said, I'm sorry, you look familiar to me, but I don't remember for sure who you are. And she said, you're the nurse. She says, you're the nurse that helped me. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, you look amazing. She was actually she was going to school to be a dental hygienist at that time. And she told me, she said that she was off all of her schizophrenic medication, and now she was only taking something for mild anxiety. But because she did what I said when she got out, and that it was exposed. But the thing is because we were there all week, there were other things I started, and that was actually the first day of the week that we were there that happened. So the second day and third day, other things happened. I started to go through the facility, and I started noticing people with attachments on them. I'm like, oh, that one's got schizophrenia. That one's alcoholic or drug addict. That one's schizophrenia. And I only missed and got it wrong on one because it was a combo deal. They were an addict and they had attachments. So because I would ask my friends, I was like, you know, by chance, does the client that you're taking care of have schizophrenia? Yeah. Well, how'd you know? Oh, I just wondered. So as we went through, I was noticing these things. I was noticing the attachments that are also on people with addiction that continue, which makes it so hard for them to overcome their addiction. And again, they've got a good thing going, so they want to encourage them to drink more or do the drugs more, so that they can continue to feed on that energy. But there was one place that we went to there that was a area that basically it was forgotten people. This was an area where the family didn't bother to come and visit anymore. They were basically just dumped there to finish out their life, literally just dumped there because everybody thought they were crazy and Aunt Joe's not going to remember them anymore. And there was this lady in there, and she's sitting at this round table, and there were 4 chairs, and she's sitting in one of them, and she's having this conversation, offering whatever it was, either coffee or pastry or whatever she was, to the other people at the table. And the nurse says, "Oh, that's so-and-so. She always sits there and she's talking to people that aren't there." But I could see the people sitting with her. She was not, having these hallucinations. There were actual spirits that were sitting at the table in the 4 chairs with her. And of course, I couldn't come out and say anything because they might have given me a one-way ticket to a room myself, So I had to keep my mouth shut, but I knew that she wasn't. And the thing about the conversation that she was having is it was like overhearing a conversation on a telephone, a one-sided conversation. It made sense what she was talking about, and that she was having this conversation with somebody that I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation. And that's another thing that I have found over and over again, is that a lot of times when they're talking to themselves, it's like that being on a phone, and you're hearing one side of the conversation.
They're talking to a spirit. I've seen that over and over and over again. That's one of the first things I noticed because, going through the university in psychology, they say, "Oh, it's a hallucination." So you go, you think it's like, what is it? Cabbage soup or something. It would make no sense.
Right.
Right.
It's a perfect word salad was the word I was looking for.
Word salad, yeah.
But it's a perfect one-sided conversation, just like Lynn says. Something they're talking on the telephone, they make perfect sense, as if they're arguing with somebody. They're emphasis, they're angry with somebody, but it's a coherent conversation. It's not word salad. It's understandable. It's not all over the place.
And they're sentences. They're full sentences. Sometimes even paragraphs. Yeah.
Right.
That I've even heard them trying to rationalize with the person. I'm going to say the spirit on the other end of the phone, so to speak. Definitely that happens. And I can see these things. So, and they're not hallucinations. And even on the flip side, as people are getting closer to death, they start seeing spirits come in, loved ones come in, and again, they're medicated. They get the Seroquel, and oh my gosh, get all the other stuff out because grandma's seeing people in the room, because sometimes they start seeing people even as early as a year in advance, and they do that. And I was telling Shauna a story about a lady named Edna. If you want me to share that, I can share that.
Sure.
It kind of pulls it all in. I had a lady named Edna. I've been working in skilled care. I've been a nurse for 38 years. And this particular lady, it was in end-of-life care, 17 of which has been in end-of-life care. I've seen lots and lots of people pass away. I've seen this happen again and again. And Edna was blind. She'd been blind for 10 years. And her children came to the nurse's station and said, "Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there." So, of course, I knew what that was, that a lot of times the spirits do come over to meet their loved ones, and anybody that's galactically inclined, it's all connected. So I said, let me come down with you, and we'll see if there's something that I can get for your mom. I'll see if she's comfortable. So I walked down with them, and Edna's laying there at a slant, and she's smiling from ear to ear, and she's reaching her hands up in the air like she's being handed something very precious and delicate, because she was being very careful with it. And I asked her, I said, "Edna," I said, "who's here?" And she said, "George." And her daughter almost passed out, and she sat down and she said, "Well, George is my father. My father's been gone for X amount of years." And then Edna speaks up and she says, "And he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie." Pixie was her poodle. when George passed away, the son had to take possession of Edna's poodle because Edna was blind and couldn't care for the dog anymore. So her son still had the dog. The dog was still very much alive, a very old dog, but still very much alive. And so the son said to me, he says, do you think that she's hallucinating? And I always hand it back because you can't come out and say, no, this happens a lot. So I hand it back and I say, well, do you think that she's hallucinating? And he says, well, I don't know. And I said, do you mind if I try something? I said, I'm not trying to change your belief system. I've experienced this, that loved ones do come forward to help people transition over at their time of crossing. And he said, well, okay. So I asked Edna, I said, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded. And I said, George, what color is your son's shirt? And Edna said, yellow. Now, Edna's as blind as a bat. She can't see anything, but George could see what color the son's shirt was and relayed the message telepathically through Edna. So, and that's another thing too, when they're transitioning, that telepathy opens, that they can hear from the other side, as well as, they can hear the human beings. And part of also with the people that are empaths that have the ability to hear things, they're also accused of having schizophrenia and things like that, because they're maybe not hearing voices that are telling them to do things wrong, but they're all considered crazy. So, and they're not.
Psychiatry uses their diagnosis like a club.
Yes.
They don't like what you're saying. Well, you're this or you're that, or it's like they pull it out like a gun out of a holster. Yeah, you're psychotic, you're schizophrenic, you're bipolar. And then they force these people on drugs, and it's particularly bad in England. I mean, they are sectioning people, forcing them into hospitals because they're saying things that they don't like said.
It's
That's right.
Another domination. It's like total domination of the mind, so that way they're dominating their person.
Yeah, so it's like they're given this power, and from what? What? They don't know anything.
No, it's like that herd mentality. It's easier to keep everybody going in the same direction, and they use the fear tactics. They don't want people to know that there's something else out there. And it's like you had mentioned about Big Pharma. They want to continue to have their stockholders happy and to continue making that money. It's all about the money. It's not about actually helping people.
No.
Right.
With medicine, and even you, Dr. Jerry and I have had this conversation before about how even with medical things, the doctor goes in with his checklist, and okay, we start with blood work, and then if we don't find something wrong with the blood, then urinalysis, then blood work, then X-ray, then we go from there, and then finally, when the symptoms subside, that's where we stop. But we don't find out what's wrong to fix it that caused the problem to begin with. And it's the same thing with mental illness. It's even worse with mental illness, because they're clueless.
Right.
It just
there's a new psychotherapy that came out that I've been training under for a good while. It's called the MACE energy system, that gets in there and goes to the cause of the problem and gets rid of it within an hour. I mean, it's gone. These traumas that have been plaguing people for a lifetime. It's an energetic system that works outside of physical reality. So in the energetic universe, where there is no time, there is no space, there is no matter. So it runs by different rules.
Right.
And it actually works. And
trauma is the key. It's a trauma. It's not genetic. It's not some chemical thing.
Right. It's stuck in there. That trauma is buried alive.
Yeah.
And this system uses the spirit to go locate where that trauma is, and then uses where it's stamped in and buried. So the ego takes the trauma, takes it and buries it. So let me handle this, and buries it alive.
Right.
But what happens is anytime somebody with a similar trauma comes close, there's a reaction. And then there's either a fight or a flight. And if you have enough of these things, your entire life is eaten up by these things, and this wasn't invented by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It was invented by a merchant marine ship captain who was brilliant, and it took him all his life to put this together. The guy's name is John Mace. He wrote 2 books on it. It's called the Mace Energy System. And for you guys out there who are interested in becoming psychotherapists and really wanting to help people, forget about going into psychology. Look into this MACE energy system. And it's a little pricey to train under, but it freaking works. And it works quickly and it works accurately. And it's almost like magic. You know, I've been using it in my practice now for well over a year, and the results are phenomenal.
That's beautiful.
So Mace wrote two
That is
books.
beautiful.
One is energy over mind, and another one called causism. And he calls it causism because it gets at the cause of mental illness.
Right.
That's one thing I saw when I was going through psychology and counseling in the PhD program. They had all these labels, all these different mental illnesses, but they didn't have anything to do about them.
Right.
And other than drug these people silly.
They're atheist materialists, and they're like searching in the material body for the problem, and like it ends there. They're not going to look further because they don't believe that anything else exists.
They don't believe anything, and they don't have an answer.
Right.
So here's psychiatry coming up time after time after time, like, oh, it's caused by this, it's caused by that. Yet they don't come up with a cure ever. They don't have a cure. They don't even know what causes it because, like you said, Sean, it lies in a different dimension. It lies in the spiritual dimension.
That's right.
It's not a physical disorder like they want you to think, so they can sell their drugs. I mean, what are they? Right. Look at the prices these guys got. It's like global antipsychotic sales have soared to $14.54 billion in 2021. $1 billion. These are toxic medications.
Most of that is like Medicaid government pays for it, and it's like stolen from our taxes.
Right.
Like it's anyway. I'm sorry.
Those sales are expected to soar to $15.5 billion in 2022. $1 billion in antipsychotic drugs that are destroying people's brains. The antidepressant market is expected to reach $15.98 billion by 2023. And here's the warnings on Prozac. It causes suicidal ideation. And as of 2017, over 1 million kids in the U.S. under the age of 6 are on psychiatric drugs.
Right.
622,723 are under the age of 5 on psychiatric drugs. 80,000 on ADHD drugs, which are Ritalin and Adderall, which are amphetamines.
Right. And the amphetamines cause the kids to grow up to be addicts, and once they're addicted to the methamphetamine, they start seeing the shadow people. Right. It's like they're being attacked. And I mean, it's as if the shadow people, like the dark feeder spirits, are working with the government and the doctors. I mean, if you look at
totally agree.
They're doing black magic ritual. Like, we don't know about it, but they keep it behind closed doors, and they have they have marching orders that somebody's giving them orders.
Right. And I've seen these kids end up in prison, meth addicts.
Right. Yeah.
And these are kids we're talking about.
And then when they're in prison, people are like, the taxpayer again is paying to keep them there. Yeah. And it's like $70,000 or whatever. I heard in New York to keep a person in prison is like $800,000 a year for one person.
It's
for what?
I don't know.
The security and the facilities and the electronics and the cells and all that kind of good. And the recidivism rate.
It's like 96%.
Well, it's 50 to 75%.
Well, So when I was 20 years ago, I went to jail for selling weed to my friends and whatever. And they told me then when I was there, they were like, the recidivism rate is like 95, 96%. And that was in 2000, in Massachusetts. Like, it's crazy.
The prison system is nuts. It's nuts. Yeah. So they bring these psychotic guys in. I mean, they wiped out the mental health centers. They wiped out the state hospitals. They said, okay, we're going to put them in mental health centers. They're not going to go to mental health centers. They wouldn't even take the medications in the state hospital. They had to watch them so they didn't cheek them and spit them out. They're not going to go out of their way to go to a mental health center to get these toxic meds that they hate.
Of course not.
And they don't. So they can't work. They commit crimes. They steal. They do stuff so they can survive.
Well, they're also given more taxpayer money. They're given SSDI. They're disabled now. So now they're getting taxpayer money just straight up. And then I have a friend that was in that system, and it destroyed his mind. He was a loving, caring person.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, he was working for Northrop Grumman, helping to build the F-35 a killing machine. And I was like, they are killing babies in Gaza with that thing. And he's like, I don't care. I want money. I was like, what has happened to you? He was totally destroyed. And, he would go for like year after year, he would get sent to the institution. They would tune him up. He was on Haldol and, all these like, lithium and all of these things. His face ballooned up and it would get all weird. And then he would be on a different med and be doing something else. And it was like, he was a good friend for many years and I've seen it happen. And like, he was an experiment. Like he would have his nightly dose was 2 fingers of pills in a sandwich bag. And he would just gulp them all. And he'd be like, he would tell me it's a keg party in my mouth. Oh,
So it's amazing how many drugs they'll put people on. And the prisons are, they are just, they're horrible. So here's these psychotic patients that they can't function out there. They commit some kind of crime. They get thrown in prison. They're already psychotic. Now they're in a hateful, violent, fearful, paranoid environment.
So
and they're there for years.
Right.
And that's being stamped into they're being stamped into their memory. So they become gangsters. They become drug dealers. They do become hitmen. I've seen them remove the antipsychotic drugs from some of these psychotic prisoners and wait till they get psychotic and then say, hey, that guy in the other gang, he's plotting to hurt you. You better go hit him first. Here's a knife.
They use them as a weapon?
They use them as torpedoes. They use them as weapons. So after years and years of that, they kick them out. And I've seen them throw people out of that prison that I knew would kill somebody within 6 months. Their sentence was up. But if one guy escapes and it hits the paper, everybody's lock your doors. There's a prisoner escaped the prison, and everybody's paranoid. It hits the newspaper. They're releasing hundreds of these people every day into society who've been brutalized by this system for years, that can't function, that don't have job skills. They've taken away all the training programs that they've had. They barely stand a chance.
Right. And the first thing they want to do is go get meth, and they got to go find that money.
They got to go get drugs to, it's just big revolving door. And I've even heard one of the wardens say, oh yeah, that's good. It's more business for us.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking.
That's how it works, man. That's the whole system.
That's
right. Yeah. So it's perfect right there. I mean, they attack us. The demons are attacking us. They attack in unison with the demons. The poor victims that are taking these meds and taking this meth and these other things, like they don't have any defenses left, and like they're just being fed on like a huge mosquito is just draining their power. Lynn, you said that there's a difference between a drug addict and a schizophrenic with the can you describe the difference in the attack? Can you see the difference, or can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
I'd love to. The schizophrenics have that similar appearance of like grape clusters over each shoulder, sometimes over one shoulder. On one occasion, I did see some in front, but they're usually closer up to the ear, and that's why they can hear them talking. In the case of the addicts, there are these, what I call archons. They fit like neat little backpacks on their backs. They either look like spiders, crabs, or reptilian. The reptilian sometimes will have a tail like an alligator that curls, or a human buttocks with no tail. So they show up either way. The thing that's very, very distinct about these is that they have a much smaller head in proportion to what the body is, kind of the opposite of a baby, big head, little body. These are big body, little tiny head. And they have a fin type thing that starts at the top of their head, goes out and connects back in with the nape of where their neck would be, but it's not rigid like a dolphin fin. It's more floppy kind of thing. So when their head is upright and they kind of peek out over the shoulder, sometimes they align with the head from behind. And the thing is when a person does go through treatment for their drug addiction or whatever, and let's say that they've overcome it, the archon will detach, but it never leaves. It always stays in their area, waiting to reattach, waiting for that opportunity. I mean, hey, they've had a good thing going. They're waiting for that person to slip up, which is why there's that constant temptation and that constant need to do follow-up, post post addiction treatment. It's very important. But that archon is there. My brother, for instance, he was a crack cocaine addict and an alcoholic, and he had a reptilian, one of these archons, and again, they fit like neat little backpacks. Their feet are almost frog-like looking in some of the cases with the reptilian, which is what he had with the 4 toes, kind of bulbous fingers where they attached in. But the thing is it would leap whenever my brother was planning to come and visit, even though he had been clean from drugs for 10 years at that point, it would jump from corner to corner of my ceiling in my house and side to side. And I'm not the only one that would see it. My kids would see it. My kids are also empaths, but we would sometimes see it at the same time. And they would say, oh, Uncle Ray must be, getting ready to come and visit. And sure enough, the very next day, I'd get a call that he was making arrangements to come up and see my mother and I that weekend. So
Linda, these things, could they tell you could see them?
Yes.
Were they aware you could see them? And how did they react to that?
I don't know if they were aware that I could see them, because a lot of times they're not aware that I can see them. But it would jump, and it would never come below 3 feet from lowering itself from the ceiling. It would stay above that area, but it could turn its head all the way around, which is why I know that the fin thing was floppy, because it would go over its face as it would twirl its head. But my kids would see it, I would see it, and my brother would arrive, it would then disappear, and then it would leave with him, or it would precede him wherever else it was that he was going. I also saw that in his house. When I went to visit at his house, I saw it in his house as well. And he constantly had a struggle with maintaining his sobriety from alcohol and drugs. But these are the things, the most difficult ones to get off are the crabs. They're because they have more legs that are embedded. The reptilians are not as hard. So at least if you get one, hope for a reptilian, because they're a lot easier to,
wow.
To get off. But the spiders, they have these
Are
kind
they,
of wobbly legs.
right, are the spiders associated with one kind of drug, and then the frogs associated with a different kind of drug? Is it like uppers give you this kind and downers give you that kind? I mean, is it that specific, or is it random? Do you know? I mean, can you decipher?
I don't know. My brother was on a mix of everything, so I think it's just the luck of the draw. Whatever you've got lingering around, or who your friends have clinging to them that while you're hanging out with them, because you can spread those things. You know what I mean? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, because like my dad was an alcoholic. Like, I'm an Irish Catholic, or I was, not Catholic anymore, but still, like, his dad was Irish Catholic drunk, like, and it goes back forever. So do you think these things are passed on? Because like, he told me when I was 12, he was like, you're going to be an alcoholic. And I was like, oh, well, no, I'm not, and I went and smoked cannabis instead. And I had that life instead. And now I don't care about alcohol, but, I have an affinity for cannabis, of course, but it's not physically addictive. It's not like a, painful.
That's different.
Yeah, right.
But it is a gateway.
Well,
So
it can
just
be. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
And like, I actually, when I was young, I wanted to prove that wrong too, because I went to DARE and they were like, oh, it's the gateway drug. And so I only smoked until I was 19, and all through high school, and everybody was like, oh, we're going to hold you down and get you drunk. I was like, no, you're not. So I was pretty good with it. And the cannabis, it gave me a buffer in that way I wasn't trying all the other drugs. And it was kind of, but I feel like I do have addictive, I'm addicted to sugar. I'm I'm an addict, and
yeah, me too.
I am addicted.
I struggle with it also.
Right. And so I'm wondering if these things are passed generationally, if if I just got one just because my dad is alcoholic, or if it is one, I don't know.
What I think with that is I think that if the parent is schizophrenic or mentally ill, especially with schizophrenics, they create the atmosphere for the child,
that makes a child vulnerable.
That allows them to to move in. So they abuse the child. I mean, when I was working in the ER, when I had a violent schizophrenic mother, I would do everything I can, get child protective services involved in it, because they would abuse that kid to the point where they would start hearing voices eventually. So I don't think there's a genetic kind of link there.
Right.
It's like
It's like
these
an
entities
epigenetic. It's like
yeah,
it just the environment
right.
influences.
These entities create an environment in that kid where it's attractive for them to move over into
Yeah,
them.
that makes sense.
I
I mean, my
agree.
dad would sit me down in front of the TV and let me eat sugar all day. So,
Oh, geez.
I got infected with that, sugar demon or whatever. So, like,
Yeah,
that's a constant battle in my life
yeah,
to like
mine
not,
too.
but it's because
But
like he created that situation. He put me in front of the TV and he
Lynn,
like,
Mhm.
can you see the shadow people at all?
Oh yeah, I
good
can see shadow
question.
people. And the
Well,
thing about the shadow people,
what do you think they are?
I think that they are human creation. A lot of it, it's that negativity and where the energy from, like, for
Like an
instance, I'll just
egregore, like it coalesces into a thing, just the ideas and the
bear
negative.
with me 1 second. I'm just switching this out real quick because my battery's getting ready to die.
It's fine. Is
The best way that I know how to describe it is when I was going through a divorce from my now ex-husband. There was usually they appear like platforms, like manta rays that flutter. They have like fluttering skirt, almost like a tablecloth going across the floor. They come up on furniture. You can mistake them for cats. They show in human figures and snakes, and they grow and get bigger as an accumulation because there was fighting in the house. There was, he was cheating. There were a bunch of problems that went around that just the arguing and the stuff going back and forth created this thing, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And those platforms they're actually platforms that then enable things that are demonic to step into those platforms once they've matured. And that's where that sort of thing happens.
But
wow,
I noticed
that's
that
interesting.
the especially working in the ER, is that if most of the time the patient doesn't see the eyes. They just look like a three-dimensional shadow that's darker than the rest of the room. But the more meth they used, the more psychotic they were. They would see two-color eyes. They would either be lime green or red. Neither one of them are favored covers for eyes. And if they saw the eyes, I knew they were in much worse shape than if they didn't. So I
Wow.
Yes.
actually used it as a clinical indicator, and
So maybe when the eyes are there, that's because the thing has matured enough for it to be inhabited by something demonic.
maybe so.
Yes. Yeah, they are platforms now. They're easily diffused also through cleansing, through, everybody wants to run for the sage, and that's fine and dandy for neutralizing, but when you're working with the demon, it only tickles it and pisses it off. So you want to go with something much stronger than that, like dragon's blood resin, or there are other things too, that can be used as well, that are important when it's a demonic type situation versus
We learned
something
from
like this. But
Jerry
these
that
can be dissipated with sage.
they don't like Psalm 23. Have you found that
Yes, they
true?
don't like Psalm 91 either.
Yeah, right. Both of those.
Interesting.
Yes.
I've had several patients tell me that the voices reacted to Psalm 23 like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Yes. And something else that works with them that I found out, kind of like that movie Monsters Inc. I don't know if you both have kids that were in that age range that watched that where these monsters would come out of the kids' closets in order to get the kids to scream to fill up their gas tanks so that they could come back and energize the city. Similarly,
Wow.
with um, these type of entities that we're talking about, they like to fill up their tank. But in the same token, on the flip side, when they found out that a child's joy and laughter filled up the tank even quicker. But the thing is that joy and laughter is repellent for those things because it brings in the light, and the darkness can't hide in the light. And they like to be covert.
Right. That's
You know,
why
I,
that's why they feed on the negative energy. That's why they tell us that to hate ourselves, and why they tell us that we should die and all that. Because then they're feeding on the correct energy for their system to ingest.
Yeah,
Jer-
and I saw in the ER, in the ER didn't want you to work with these people. They wanted you to just get them out of there. So that the doctors didn't know what to do with psychotics and mentally ill. They just wanted them out of there, so they could see medical
Yes.
patients. So they relied on us to kind of, diagnose them and get them out of there to somewhere. But I wanted to give these people as much as I could from what I knew from all the years I spent before I went working with the ERs. And one of the things that the voices hated the most was for the patient to be told that they were parasites. You can always expect a reaction when you went to tell the patient that they were energetic parasites. They would go nuts. And in the ER, they're coming in raw off the street, so they're full of drugs. They're full of they're psychotic, floridly psychotic. They're not on any tranquilizer or anything. So they're as volatile as they can get. So you had to be careful about it. And the other thing, it was like, walking on thin ice, because, if I told one of these patients, hey, listen, these things are entities and they're parasitic entities, and they went and they told a psychiatrist, I'd be in big trouble. So it was like, it had to be real careful with that kind of stuff like you, Lynn. You couldn't get caught telling these people the truth.
They wanted to be disguised as the person's own thoughts too, right? They wanted to.
They wanted. I've had several patients ask them, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would say, "We are you."
Yes.
Yeah, right.
We are you. So they want them to think that the thoughts that these entities put into their mind or insert into their thought stream actually belong to them. Sherry Sweeney says every negative thought that comes into your mind about somebody else or yourself comes from them.
Right. So they're ultimately they feed on everybody, not just
they
the drug
feed on
addicts
everybody, and they try to
schizophrenic.
steer you by the thoughts that they insert into your mind.
Right.
So you have to be careful about what you're hearing.
Right. Yeah. Know thyself. Right. To know your own self is to know that you don't hate yourself. Like, I love myself. Why would I think that? Why would that happen? And then if I thought that it would influence my life so that I would make choices where it would be harmful to myself, and then I would be giving off of this loosh, this negative.
That's what they try to do. They will get the person to sabotage themselves.
Yes, that's true.
They don't want you to succeed. A lot of the things they say, you're stupid, you're ugly, nobody likes you, they're just faking like they like you, you're worthless, that kind of stuff, it comes directly from them.
Right.
That's where it comes from. It doesn't come, you're an energetic being at your core, a loving, energetic being. This other crap comes from elsewhere.
Right. And
That's true.
It's like they have been separated from the light and the oneness that we are still connected to. So the only way that they can feed themselves is by attaching. Otherwise, they'll disappear or they'll get thrown in a lake of fire. Jerry, you talked about how they come in and they act like they're punching a clock. Like, okay, I'm here to pester you for 10 hours, and then it'll be the next guy. And if I don't do this right, then they're going to throw me in a lake of fire. I don't want that. Ooh, and it's so like they have marching orders.
Yeah, they have marching orders. They have echelons, different levels where they're given orders from these higher ups. And they're told that if you don't do what you're told, you will cease to exist. Right. You have no light in you. So they lie to these entities saying, you have no light in you. You exist only at our will. And if you don't do what we say, you will cease to exist.
Right. And the only way that they can feed is through taking that negative energy from us. And it's like the Buddhists say, this life is suffering. So it's as if because we're incarnated here, we're going to have to deal with these things. It's like they're here waiting for us and we are their food. So
that's true.
If we can empower ourselves, please.
And people need to wake up to that. For a Christian religion, where Jesus cast these things out some 23 times in the Bible, it's being ignored today. Like, that's just a fairy tale from thousands of years ago. It doesn't any longer exist. That's a bunch of crap.
Society's run by Satanists.
You're surrounded by these things constantly. They're always around you. They're always looking for an entry point. They're always inserting bad thoughts into your mind. They're always trying to trip you up. Wake up.
Do you think do you agree with that sentiment, Lynn?
I do agree with that. And as you mentioned, incarnate, I'd like to focus on that a little bit. There are a lot of people that have reincarnated, and those of us that are incarnates, which the three of us are, because we would not be here having this conversation if we were not. We chose to come back in, and we actually chose to come in during this time. And the thing about it is, too, is that Earth is a very, very hard, difficult planet for learning, and we are seen as heroes when we go back over. So we chose to come in for whatever's supposed to happen. I think Dr. Jerry and I were talking at one point, too, about how, we had to get old enough that we didn't give, that we didn't give a crap, of what happens to us at this point. We couldn't do something about it earlier because we had to have our jobs. We had to, take care of our families. But now, that we can come out with this stuff and expose it, because there's nothing that they can do to us at this point. They want to take my thing away, I'll just retire. So, it's like, okay, vacation, woo, long list.
I just dropped my license so they couldn't drum something up and say, oh, yeah, we took his license because of this. They don't have a license to take. And
now you're doing real work, Jerry. You're doing real, you're actually healing people now.
Yeah. And see, they don't understand anything about the energetic therapies. It's just foreign to them.
Right.
That, so they can't, oh, you're not doing psychotherapy. No, I'm not doing your psychotherapy. I'm doing something that you don't even understand. You're not even in the ballpark.
Right.
That's true.
And it's
so important.
Like the SRA, the satanic ritual abuse system of traumatizing children and like cultivating them into being psychopaths. Like they understand the opposite end. They know that they can, with trauma, make this stuff happen. There are rituals for demonizing children that, to put them in certain places in the mind to like separate different, it's a whole science that they understand. But then the psychiatry that we see, like the dark occult is ancient psychiatrists, psychologists since ancient Babylon. They've been studying the mind and how to control people with mind control since that time. And then they've evolved into this traumatizing system that they have created, which is like scientifically precise. And nowadays they have developed technologies, lighting that flashes, they invade the mind in many ways.
Shooters that just run out and just slaughter people for no apparent reason.
Right.
We got to get their guns away. So we got to create all these shootings.
Yes, because the guns are the barrier from total domination. That's how they totally control a populace, by taking the guns. Look at Pol Pot and Mao and all that. So they do understand how this works, but what we see is that they don't know. I don't know what's happening. And there is a whole other spectrum of it. There's the light side, which is denied. Oh, that's woo-woo, that's not real. But you turn around and they're working on the dark side. They believe the dark side, they work with it, and they know there's power in it. And they deny us they say, oh, the light doesn't even exist. And
it does.
Right. And there is a whole scientific spectrum of the light side too, I'm sure.
Yes.
That we can understand. And so like this is an entire body of knowledge. It's not only evil and I don't even know where I was going at, but I'm glad that you agree with what I was saying. Thank you. That wasn't a question. I do that sometimes. Please.
That there are two sides to the coin. There's in paranormal, there is a dark side, which is what we've been talking about today, but there's also that light side, which is Edna. That is part of the light side. It's part of the beauty of getting ready to cross over, seeing loved ones come in.
The Edna story. Right.
Yes, that is part of the light.
Yes.
So, so there are two sides of it, and they're both called hallucinations.
By the atheists, materialists who want to dominate us. Right.
Either way, you're crazy. So it's like, no,
it's
you're
not real. It's not real. Right? Don't go there. Don't go there.
Right. It's better to just embrace it and to explore the realities of what is actually, because you, Lynn, can see them. You, Jerry, have experienced in your life the other tangible effects of these things.
Yeah, I can feel them.
Right. So
I
There you
can't
go.
see them, but I can feel them.
right. And they make an energy, they do the thing, and we can investigate that and learn more about that. And who cares if people think we're crazy? I think this is a great conversation.
I don't care.
I'm learning a lot today, and this is very interesting to me.
It's more acceptable now that some other things have come to light, and more people are talking about it. So, I mean, I've never ever had anyone come up to me and accuse me of making it up or saying anything negative that way. Instead, they come up and they say, "Hey, there used to be a chair in my grandmother's house that would move itself out into the hallway in the middle of the night. And I've never told anybody this story, but I know that you'll believe me." They come to me with their stuff.
That's great.
They want to share their stories because yeah, I mean, they have. I mean, Dr. Jerry asked me a lot of questions before he believed my story. He can tell you that I'm not crazy. I mean, he's coming from a professional standpoint.
That's right. I pronounce you not crazy.
There you go. So thank you. But I'm just saying, they tend to come to me and say, "Gee, I've never told anybody this before," and all of the different things that have happened.
And I get hundreds of emails thanking me for exposing the voices as entities.
Yes.
That they can relate to that. They can personally relate to that rather than you're crazy or you're hallucinating. There's nothing you can do except take these toxic meds and get out of our face. Come back once a month and get some more. It's
it resonates a truth in them. They can tell the truth because they've been living it, and they hear you say it, and they're like, "Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly it."
And the parents could do a lot of things too. Children, they don't have those filters between like age 5 when they start to come into place. And that's why they talk about their invisible friends and things like that. But society and parents play a lot into it too. When Jim Bob says that, there's been a man at the foot of his bed that's scaring him during the night, and he talks about it more than once. It's not just a one-time thing. The parents like, "Oh, there's nothing there," or maybe it's your Uncle Bob coming in to check on you, or your guardian angel. Well, if it was their guardian angel or Uncle Bob, it wouldn't be scaring the bejesus out of the kid, shaking his bed and pulling his covers off in the middle of the night. So they need to give them more tools to empower themselves and coping skills, to empower themselves and to understand that there is this world that parallels ours, and actually meshes in with ours. And that, just because he's standing at your bed, if he's making, the first 2 things they should ask is he making you feel uncomfortable? Or is he telling you to do something that you're not supposed to do? And if the answer is yes to any of those, they need to give their children either a prayer or something that they can use, or just simply, say, "You're not invited, get out of my room." Because they have to be invited in a lot of cases, to do that.
And being fearful of them is the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
They feed on that. In the prison, in the psych wards, no matter what was going on in front of me, I couldn't show any fear because that's it's like running from a dog that's attacking you. You don't want to do that.
That is very true.
Wow.
Yep. They got to teach, and children grow up to be afraid of it because it's the thing that nobody wants to talk about, because the parents are afraid and the kids get it on a different level.
Right.
So.
And the parents, they don't want to believe these things, and they teach the kids that it's not real or whatever, and then the kids are indoctrinated with the materialist society that's telling them it's not real, and then they're just victims. They they have to deal with this society which keeps them at a terrible job, and they have these terrible relationships, and they listen to terrible TV and music, and and it's just like we're all just waiting victims just for them to come and feed on us. It's as if they're making the situation possible for those entities, like it's a red carpet for them. Here's America.
It is. It's rolling out the red carpet.
Yeah.
That's a good way to explain it. Yeah, they are. So
have you ever seen these things, Lynn? Have you seen them make the scratch, or have you, how do they affect our body physically like that?
From what I understand, the scratches actually come from the inside out. So before they're seen and felt, they're actually something more internal, the way that they do it. What I saw with my friend was we were upstairs in the kitchen of this house. We had gone back because I couldn't keep workers there. They kept leaving early. And a worker left the windows open on the house. So I had to go back because I was working the weekend with my friend to close the windows. And when we went in to the house, there was always this problem with the lock, which turned out to be a hell dog. There were two demons and a young man that had hung himself in the house. I have pictures of some of this. Also, I don't look at it much because I don't want to bring it to the forefront, but there is proof. So anyway, when we were standing in the kitchen, well, let me back up. When I was having trouble getting my lock back out of the door, my friend went into the foyer and she's standing there, and you don't want to mock them because they do have an intelligence about them. And she said, "Oh, you're not going to leave me here and let the boogeyman get me, are you?" And she started to laugh. Well, they targeted her. So when we went into the bedroom and pulled in the air conditioner and secured all of the windows, I was proud. I wanted to show her around a little bit. And so we stopped in the kitchen. I had bought these wooden horse heads because my daughter was having a wild horse theme in her room to drape her balance over. My friend Ellen, she was holding one in each hand. And all of a sudden I could hear this buzzing, energetic sound that sounded kind of like a didgeridoo. It was that wah wah kind of buzzing sound. And there was this misting wall that was just kind of moving in on us. And of course I could hear it and see it, but I didn't say anything because I didn't think that anybody else but me could hear it. And all of a sudden she speaks up and she says, "What's that sound?" And I'm like, "Can you hear that?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, remember I told you that I thought that there was a ghost in the house?" Again, it's a story. I'm not going to go into that part, but I did see a ghost in the house that day before I left to pick up my kids. And I told her about it while we were driving over because I thought if she was going to be scared and didn't want to go in, I'd get the man across the street to help go in with me. But I was thankful that I didn't have to go back in the dark. So she's standing in the kitchen and she's holding both of these, one in each hand, and she starts screaming, oh my God, what is it? A spider bite?" And she put him down on the counter and she starts grabbing her shirt, trying to twist the back of it to the front to see if there was a spider on her because it was burning so badly. And I went and I lifted up the back of her shirt, and between her shoulder blades, underneath her bra strap, there was a 4-inch claw mark. Now, being a nurse and wound care specialist, it was just starting to welt and bead blood. And the thing about a scratch is that even if you pick the scab off, that welting thing doesn't happen again. It might bleed, but not that welting thing. So I knew that it was a fresh wound. And I asked her, I said, "You've got a big scratch back here. What happened?" I mean, there was no furniture in the house or anything yet. So I asked her, "Did you scratch yourself on the car window getting out of the car?" I couldn't figure out what it was. And she started screaming again. And she said, "It got me again." And she had a claw mark then on her stomach off to the left-hand side below her belly button. And at that point in time, that mist was moving in on us. And I just started calling out for every name: God, Jehovah, Buddha, Mother Mary, Archangel Michael, Allah, pick one. Anything that I could to get them to move back. And the misting did move back, but it stayed hovering in the doorway. And we ended up leaving very, very quickly. And, I didn't even care if the house was locked up at that point because we figured if anybody wanted to come in, it could take care of itself.
Wow.
So, it just,
Well, I saw
one of
that.
those things, but
I saw a similar thing in the prison.
What's that?
I saw a similar thing in the prison with one prisoner. He comes in one morning. He was psychotic. He said, they scratched me last night. They clawed my back. And
Yes.
he said, "Do you want to see?" And I said, "Okay, I'll take a look." He took off his shirt, and across his back is these like 4 fingers like this, just right across his back. He could not have inflicted that on himself. And if anybody else did, it probably would have started a fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
And it does happen. They are able to leave bruise marks. They're able to leave bite marks. They're able to leave claw marks. They can push you. They can pull your hair, depending on how activated they are able to be off your energy. And like Dr. Jerry said, it's so important to maintain neutral during those things. I remember at one point standing downstairs in that house after I finally had enough, and I was moving back out, and I was down there packing my things, and the one lower level demon was kind of peeking around the doorway, and I could see it out of my peripheral vision, but I was ignoring it. And I knew that it was going to try to do something to get that kind of moment so that it could feed off of the energy of me being frightened. So I was waiting for it. And all of a sudden in my pocket, I feel this feeling of a snake coiling quickly in my pocket, round and slithering down the outside of my leg. And I stayed very calm, and I just turned and I said, "You think that's funny?" I said, it's not funny. You're not going to get any humor here. You're not going to get what you're looking for. You need to leave." And it was, and it actually was shocked with that. But, people talk about that there are cold spots. Sometimes there are warm spots too. They're not just cold spots, depending. I mean, I've been attacked myself by them. I've also been scratched by them, but my scratch didn't show on the surface. When the priest put the cross over it and told them to leave this child of God alone, the pain immediately stopped. But when my friend was complaining about it, hot and burning, it felt like somebody had taken a hot skewer and cut me to the bone. I was expecting, when I lifted up my hand, to see blood gushing out from underneath, and was surprised, of course, when it wasn't. But I mean, they can do these things. Like I said, my son slept there, woke up with 3 bite marks on his legs, and it's like they happened while he was sleeping. And we only spent 2 nights there. I never moved in. I bought that house and never moved in. That's how bad it was.
Wow. This is pretty scary. I mean, this is like horror movies, and they a lot of horror movies take these elements, similar elements, like Freddy would attack in dreams and would be able to scratch or whatever, and like they have, it's weird, like Hellraiser has different elements, and a lot of these things relate to your story and what, like the shadow, like
it's like Dracula.
Well, yeah, that too. Like a lot of these stories, it's like the writers understand the real demons and are taking elements of that and applying it. It's really interesting, but it's scary, the idea that they can attack our bodies physically.
They can if they're able to energize enough to do that. Again, that's why it's so important to stay calm. But they're very real.
And they feed off of they feed off the paranoia. So the devil is paranoia.
And people don't realize when they're watching TV and they're taking in this violence and stuff, and that adrenaline's running, that's also letting off.
Oh yeah, they feed off of that too. And then you got all these murder things on TV, where by the time a teenager turns 17, he's seen 5,000 murders on TV. That's how you solve your problems, is murders.
And now video games.
Then they try to take the video games, and then they try to take our guns away.
Right.
So here they program these kids to be violent, to use guns, and then they want to take our guns away.
Right. They want the kids to join the military so they can go shoot whatever brown people they want.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they're not taking my gun away. This mama's packing. So
yeah, that's right.
Everybody got a small arsenal over here.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's the great equalizer. That's right. Yeah, God bless you both.
Of course, I'm not going to use it unless provoked, but
well, that's what it is. Do no harm, but take no shit at the same time. You got to defend what you love and what you care about. You can't let them, because otherwise they take the world. Somebody's got to stand up and say no. Yeah,
that's very, very true.
Man, so how do we stand up and say no to these other dimensional
you need
attackers?
To watch the thoughts that enter into your mind and realize that Swedenborg says none of your thoughts belong to you. They either come from the good side or they come from the bad side. You're the middleman. You're the one who chooses which ones you're going to put your attention on, and which ones you're going to react to.
That's true.
So watch what's coming into your mind. Negative thoughts about yourself or anybody else don't come from you.
That's true.
Don't watch movies like Human Centipede or whatever else. Like
those negative monster movies or murder mysteries, stuff like that, or war stories. The kind of things that provoke violence, especially these violent video games where they normalize the murder and the violence.
Yes, and it's like a traumatizing. It's traumatizing the psyche on a lesser level. Like in a video game, oh no, I'm exploded. Oh no, they're shooting at me, and it creates those energies that can also be fed upon.
Right.
Yeah, and what I was mentioning too, I wanted to bring back about the texture of the air, that it can be cool or warm. Experiencing the thickness of the warmth to the air that they can create, they could easily suffocate a baby. The SIDS, they still don't have a diagnosis for, and after having my hair pulled and being pushed by one, they are strong enough that they could suffocate a child in their crib, to feed off of the rippling effect of the mourning and the grief and the crying and the sobbing, where they get their fix from that as well.
Well, a lot of that comes from a lot of sudden infant death is male babies, and that's because they bleed out from circumcision. And if you look at the Jewish tradition, they are infected with something that compels them to traumatize their own babies. That is a demonic force, and for the compliance of the father and the grandfather holding the kid down and letting this monster like do what it does, and it's the most pain like that itself is a generational traumatization where these demons can feed.
That is true.
And
my son was not circumcised. Thank you very much.
Bless you.
Yeah,
mine either.
I was a urological nurse for 3 years, and I remember when I was pregnant with him, and the urologist comes and he says, "Are you going to let me do your son's circumcision?" I said, "I'm not having him circumcised."
Good for you.
He says, "You're not?" And I said, "No, only Israel and America does that."
Right.
Nobody
You're not? Huh?
That tests have shown out of 100 men that were sexually active and then had their circumcision done, that their sensitivity decreased like 50%.
At least 60.
Why would I do that?
Yeah, right. But and then it also, babies feel 3 times the pain as an adult. So like that, they used to say that babies don't feel pain. They used to do open heart surgery on babies with no anesthetic. It's sick what used to happen, and like now they're recognizing, okay, it's actually trauma, and this infliction of trauma causes a change in the person, so that mental effect, it's the same as satanic ritual abuse. It's the same.
It's
so
that
that
in there,
right, and it becomes part of the character of the individual, and then they believe that they don't own their body, and that they that violence and is the only way to get anything done, and dominating others, and it creates this. If you look at Israel and America, and we're the cops of the world, we go and dominate everybody. Why is that? You know what I mean?
They always got a war going on. I mean, the military-industrial complex always has a war, and then no matter where you go, I just came through Heathrow Airport. They're so paranoid that I've never seen security that tight. They would, most airports say, they put you through the X-ray machine, they look through the stuff if there's anything suspicious. Heathrow, they check you like 4 different times, take pictures of your face, they rifle through all your luggage, and you only got like 50 minutes to catch a flight at the other end of the airport. People are missing their flights because of their paranoid security crap.
Right. It's not freedom.
Nuts.
That's what Israel does to they're occupying another country, and they do that to the citizens of that country. Like, it's apartheid. That's how they want to, that's the New World Order right there. I mean, basically. And those people, like, they are creating a hell world where these demons can feed. And it pleases the demons.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure does.
So again, how do we, we know Psalm 23 works, Psalm 91 works. I guess we didn't have that on my shows earlier. That's new to me. Psalm 91 is effective. Jerry had thick rubber bands around people's wrist, and he would teach them.
that would temporarily shut the voices up.
Right. I mean, it's an effective tool in the arsenal.
You know what I would be curious about is iron, an iron bracelet. I know this sounds weird, but
I've heard a lot of patients say iron
really
helps. Iron,
because that's what they used
steel,
to make the
but
fences
iron
around graveyards was out of iron.
Wrought iron fences, right.
Yeah,
they hate Gregorian chants. They can't stand the Gregorian chants.
Okay.
you know, Sherry's "That's a Lie" program, where you hear a thought come into your head saying you're no good, you're stupid. Counter that with "That's a lie."
Right. And
You know,
that
you
way
don't
you
want
aren't
to accept
accepting it.
that, right?
Right. Because it takes your consent. Because
Right,
once you
and
consent,
you're not
then you
just
feel it. Right. Yeah.
and you're not just resisting it, because what
Mm,
you resist persists. When you say it's a
right.
lie, you're deflecting it, so
Right.
they can't
I,
get their hooks in you. You
yep,
know, so
that's true.
they'll put thoughts into your mind and see if they're like fishermen. They'll hook up, put a bait on there, throw it in there, and see if you'll bite on it. If you bite on it, they'll reel you in.
Right.
You know,
That's
they
so
can
true.
gain access to all your memories, which is really strange. They can go into your mind. They can
Right.
pull up every rotten thing you've ever done and rub it in your face until you start thinking, "Oh, I'm a bad person. I'm a
Right.
bad person."
And that's the key to your negative emotions is your real memories. Do you,
Uh,
Lynn, were you trying to say something?
I was just going to say, I totally agree with Dr. Jerry. In addition to saying, no, that's not true, you need to say, you're not invited here.
Mm,
Because there's a thing about being invited with spirits that they have to be invited. And a lot of times that gateway is through drugs or alcohol addiction, or maybe something that somebody, did with that. And not only that, people have to realize too that they have to clean up their act. Just
right.
because, like when
It
I go
takes
into
an
houses,
active will, and you need to do it in the real life. You need to do the actions that create the
yes,
freedom. Right.
right, and stop doing the things that would be feeding them as well. But they definitely to tell them that, all of us have an auric field, that bubble that they talk about, that you can stand next to somebody that's maybe behind you in the store, and you just know that somebody's behind you in the line, even though you haven't turned around. You can feel their presence, and it's so important to keep that healthy as well, because then things can attach to you as easily, and they kind of bounce against it. So
Do you
need
think
to
that eating
as
right,
well.
as well as being emotionally, you think that is important to
yeah, they
eat?
I
want you
do.
to eat
I think
sugar.
also that they
Right.
need, people need to bathe regularly. They need to bathe regularly in a
Yeah,
salt
salt water.
water solution.
Interesting.
I take a bath
Like
once a week
Epsom
myself
salt?
with a tablespoon of ammonia in there, because they hate anything with ammonia.
Huh.
You can get that little spray, a spray bottle with holy water or whatever, and spray it around, make your mix. But I do, and I while I'm in the bathtub, I'm reciting, Psalms 91, and I'm, doing that sort of thing, just to make sure that my field is intact,
Interesting.
to help prevent that. Because since we are all empaths, our lights are very, very bright, and they have a tendency to mistaken us as angels because ours are brighter. So they have a tendency to come close, or they have a tendency to follow, and it's usually the lost souls, the ones that have not crossed over. So at the time of death, you can choose either to cross over or not. And a lot of these souls that are attached to these people with schizophrenia are people that have not crossed over.
Hmm.
They're trying, they're still trying to live their life through this person, and it's just not a good thing. And a lot of times too, people that don't cross over, they don't cross over for a reason. Maybe they've been a nasty person, and they haven't, they don't want to go over on the other side and meet their creator, and that's why they're so negative. And they still, if they don't cross over, they still have their mental illness, they still have their addiction,
Right.
their cause of death shows their wound.
Like the bardos of the, if you look at the Buddhists, they talk about in the Book of the Dead, there are these realms where you can have an intention with your, you can still move about as a spirit, have intention. There's something called a POA technique, POWA, I think, technique, where you can actually invade someone else's body and feel their feelings, feel the being a human, but you don't really have control of it. You can just some Buddhist monks who have trained can take over other people's bodies before death, like with astral projection. And and the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about how you can like enter into others and experience. So this makes sense. I've heard of this before, and when you say that, you're like, oh, like it dawns in my brain, like, oh, this is what they were talking about in those texts. And
Right.
his technique. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I had for instance, as a nurse, I had a client that was actively passing, and I'm standing at my med cart in front of her room, and I see this spirit man peeking around a pillar in the sitting area that was right across from me, and I'm like, "Hi," and he's kind of like looking over his shoulder, thinking that I'm talking. He looked like he'd been like from the 1800s with the style of clothes that he had on. And so, he at first I'm like, no, you there? Why haven't you, crossed over? And he kind of then came forward, and off to the side I could see him, and he was this handsome man. He looked to be like in his 30s, and he had this Swiss cheese appearance to his abdomen, which to me indicates that he died of a corrosive disease like cirrhosis of the liver or cancer or something like that. The funny thing was, I was saying to him, I'm like, I can help you cross over. And he's like, he was hesitant. And I'm like, this is a good deal. Most of the people that would see you, they'd run off screaming. I said, if they could see you, I said, and otherwise people can't, but I can help you. And he said, milady, he had this very heavy Irish brogue. And he says, milady, I can't cross over. And I'm like, oh, sure you can. He says, my wife and my mistress are on the other side, and neither one knew about the other. So he ended up staying earthbound because he was afraid to cross over, because he didn't want to have to face the fact that he had been cheating and now everybody knew. So, yeah.
Right.
So there are a lot of things. So you get spirits too that are more malevolent and negative, who did terrible things to people. And those are the ones that are clinging to these people with schizophrenia. And it's why they're saying such awful, ugly things to them. So, and that's
That's why they're making contracts. The dark occultists are making contracts with these things to gain power while they're still here. Like, maybe that makes sense. Like, I mean, I'm not sure if I believe any of like the dark occult or the religion or any of it, but I mean, I see how they act and what they do. And, I listen to your, I'm more inclined to believe what all of you two have experienced in your life. I believe that to be true, but like can they bind demons with ritual magic and make them do their will, and what happens with the the signing of contracts and blood and all this, and like I don't know about that. Like I don't know how far and deep that goes, but it seems to all fit. Like it all makes sense, and like they're here to feed on us, and if they have to consent to go to the light, and they have to accept the lessons, then they have to change. And people that don't, they get stuck in the bardos because they don't want to change, and because like drug addicts will stay in the bardo. Like, I mean, it's like an addiction, the way that they are stuck in that realm, and then they don't pass through to the next side to get to experience the growth and to move on to the next step.
That's true. Yeah, addiction definitely can hold them here. You'd be surprised how many dead people, if people could see if they're a cocktail hour and they're sitting, and I went to it was like a sports bar kind of place, and there was this couple sitting there, and they're getting kind of romantic, but next to this woman, she had her drink on the counter of the bar. She had it on the bar, and this dead man is standing next to her with his head. Apparently he was decapitated, and his head, he had it sitting on the counter, and his nose was like wiggling over the top of her drink, trying to inhale the fumes. So if people realized how many dead people they have standing around them for their addiction, even on cigarette break, on their drinking, type thing.
Wow.
And if you got a little porno thing going on, don't think that you're the only one in the room, because you may have a whole fan club. You may end up needing to charge admission for what you're doing.
That's like Lilith and Samael. Like Lilith and Samael were like broken apart by God because of their fornication, and they invade each other. They invade us so that we can, in our corporeal bodies, fornicate with each other, and they are feeding from the other side, as if they are copulating together. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I had one female client once, I think at the state hospital, where the voices told her, we have sex with you every night, or something to that effect. And she said, no, you don't. No, you don't. And they came back and said, yeah, we do. Every time you masturbate, we're there.
Wow.
Yeah, well, and I have a third book coming out called 111 Becadon Drive that's all about a spirit who was going from a townhouse to townhouse, pulling down women's underwear and crawling in bed with them. So, and I actually have a picture of this that has not been defuncted in any way. They can't. It was taken during the daytime. You can see it's the first and only time that I've seen a naked spirit. But in this picture, he's actually got his hands over his man parts trying to cover it, which I think is kind of ironic considering what he was doing. You know, now all of a sudden he gets to have that centerfold moment, and he decides to cover himself up. So, you know, it just, yeah, and I
So
took
yeah,
that picture
they're
with my
addicted
camera.
to these human, and that's what our like the Satanists accentuate our addiction to sex and to the thrill of violence and to the drugs, and they get us hooked, and it causes us to like hate ourselves and be, you know, and that further feeds the demons. But they're creating a culture where everybody's addicted, everybody wants sex and porn. Like they got, you know, kids have a cell phone and they can see porn. Like it's in every kid's pocket if they have a smartphone. And it's just like there is no limit. And if you watch this documentary called Childhood 2.0, where the young girls talk about how they have to like compete with the boys' ideas of what women are and do because the boys are watching porn, and the women have to, like, the real women have to become that in order to please and get the attention of the boys. It's totally changing society, and it's affecting them so young. Their brains they don't know how to consent to yes or no. They just like, oh, boobies, you know, and
Yeah.
it's just that's how they get us, you know, and make us addicted.
Yep. And it's taken the beauty out of lovemaking and real true connection and love. And what those girls don't realize is it's not their job to please the guy. It's his job to pursue her. And he's happy pursuing her. You know, another book, The Gap, my fourth book, but it talks all about that in there that, you know, you need to take control of your cookie, because if you give up your cookie too soon, he's going to take a bite and he's going to be booking. So, you know, women think that to give it up immediately is what the man wants. Well, of course, but they need to wait long enough for that man to have made that investment in it with his heart and that love connection before they do. So
it's not something that is so thrown away like the Tinder you swipe left. Oh, okay. You know, it's something that's precious and sacred, and it is related to your emotional core. It's not just.
It is.
Yeah, it's not just masturbation, you know, with another person's body. It's like it affects other deeper levels, and it could be being fed on by Samael and Lilith. You know, who knows what's causing that, or what's, you know, and these addictions to the human realm, like I am addicted to, I want to have more sugar, so I'm not going to cross over the other side. I'm going to stay here and sniff that lady's drink. You know, it creates it fills the ranks of these demon things that are grape clusters on people's shoulders, because these things, like it fills the legions of demons, because you know, these people are addicted, and if they can release from that attachment, like the Buddhists say, like the attachment to human life keeps us stuck here, and we need, in order to grow, we need to accept the growth and accept the light, and that we are one and we are love, and go with that and do with that, you know, what's natural, instead of what these invaders are trying to influence us to do, because they have an agenda, and they you know, they're salivating, waiting to feed.
That is so true, you know, and people too, words are so important, you know. A parent, you know, a child that overhears that they're stupid, you know, they end up believing that too, and it kind of leaves them more opened, and things that happen to them, it leaves them more open for things to attach at a later time. So parents have to be responsible with their words for these kids, because they will stamp them, like Dr. Jerry was talking about. And a lot of times children can be stamped in utero. even before they've come here, they can hear the parents fighting. They can, sense the mother's stress, or maybe if she's a single mom and didn't want that third child, you know what I'm saying? So, and they pick all of that up, and it does influence the way that they, what they become as an adult as they grow up. So
like
all of that is important.
They haven't formed a full ego yet until they're at least like 7 or 8 or something. They start to have a selfness. And we as parents are programming their inner voice, like the self monologue that like I have, like I said, my dad's an alcoholic, and like my parents got divorced and stuff, and so I like have these, like I don't see myself as I should, and it's a constant struggle. Like I need to recognize that I am the light, and that I'm, because otherwise it's kind of my default. Like my situation has put me in a way, in a sense that I need to self-medicate with drugs, and I need to, life is really like, I don't deserve anything good. And, so you're right. We need to create a positive situation for our kids and show our kids that everything we do is because of the light and the love, and because we care. Like, my son is 3, and he wants to like throw everything and do the opposite of everything we say, and it's like,
oh, that's normal for 3.
right.
Yeah,
And it's like, it's
normal.
tough for us to like be like, okay, like, and I might yell to get his attention, but then I'll like sit him down and tell him why, and like, show him like, this is because I care, and like I make a point to do that at least. And I do my best to change. Like every day is a new chance to be the best dad, So like it's and I think that everybody should have that, like, because really, like, we're not going to be here forever, and this world isn't ours. Like, we are introducing them to this place, and the future lies with them. The Satanists have been doing this intergenerationally, like, torturing their own children to get the desired effect. And
so true.
We need to give the opposite to have the desired effect.
And,
so
and the voices absolutely hate children. They absolutely hate children. They really hate children. They hate families. But they
try to
particularly
destroy
hate children. Yeah, they try to destroy the kids.
Do you think that's because they're closer to the light? They're more.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah,
I think so too. That would be my guess.
Pure.
And it's okay too not to be a perfect parent, as long as you know how to say you're sorry and show humility. That also shows a side to them that so if you make a mistake, then you can say that you're sorry.
Right.
So,
and as long as we really truly care, they can tell.
Yes, they sure do. Absolutely. Kids are great. I got 3.
Yeah, we need to have more kids. That's another way to battle this, is to have more kids and to teach them the right thing about morality and care, and what's really going on, so that when they grow up, there is a wall that keeps this, the Luciferian agenda from taking over the world. Like this new world order is grinding along, and the only way to stop it is to have a next generation that is smart enough to say no, and to work together to create a different system that's based on human interactions, voluntary, loving. Like, we need to build a positive, because we don't work together. We're just trying to go to work and like survive. And if we can make kids that will be like, they'll be light years ahead of us. Like, we have at least woken up to the machinations of what's really happening. And in order to make any kind of change, you need to have kids, and to, because that vibration isn't going to continue. We're going to die. Like, it's, in order for this world to be influenced with a positive light, it's up to us to do it. That's just my thoughts. It
is true. And, and traditional religion has played a big part in some of the skewing of things as well. And it's not that it's a bad thing for people that believe that, but it does create limitations. And, it's so important too for people to understand that you need to keep your emotions harmonious and not get tied up in those jealousies and those some of those, pick your battles. It's like, even with your kids, notice the positive and not and the negative, sit them down and tell them why it's a negative. Definitely. But try to focus more on the positive and steer them. And, you don't need to beat your kids. You don't need to even hit your kids, at all.
Demons want that because then they've got a victim forever with the kid, like always being like haunted by,
Yeah, that's right.
That's true. Absolutely true.
Well, guys, we're closing on 2 hours now.
God bless you both for being here. Like, thank you so much. This has been very interesting. And Lynn, I hope maybe someday you could join us again to tell us more of, the stories of and Jerry, like you are always welcome. You are one of my favorite guests, and the listeners all agree with me. There's always a very positive interactions and feedback from the listeners whenever you're a guest. And we're very happy to have you. Thank you both. Lynn, you said you wrote books. So please tell us your books and where our people can find them and find your presence online. Any other work that you've done, please share that.
Okay, I've been on over 100 podcasts, including Coast to Coast AM, and also with Linda Moulton Howe multiple times with Coast to Coast AM. I have a podcast of my own that is on Tuesday nights. Actually, Dr. Jerry's going to be on as my guest this coming Tuesday.
Awesome.
It's called Synchronicity, Upper Level, the Next Level Paranormal. So it's not the 101 class. It's a place that you can come, not to be convinced that there are cryptids and Bigfoot and ghosts and things like that. We already know that those things exist. It's an area that people can come to congregate to talk about those sorts of things and their experiences and feel comfortable doing that. So if you're not at that level, then you may feel a little overwhelmed and it might not be for you, and that's okay. I am a world-renowned author. My books are all over the world. Just recently, one of them opened in Australia and India. So I have five books right now. I have Omnipresent, which is the first one that was written based on the house that I purchased that I wasn't able to ever move into, which I bits and pieces on here. I did a follow-up book with Omnipresent. Omnipresent's going to end up being a 5-book series. So this is the second book. It's called Omnipresent, What Happened Next. It talks about the things that happened next, as well as it goes into the mental illness and that sort of thing that different things that I spoke about to help people with. My third book is called Colors of Heaven, and I wrote this story with my ability to have second sight. I wrote this story based on my 17 years in end-of-life care, seeing hundreds of people pass away, and the consistencies with that, including seeing my own mother leave her body at the time of death. That was just beautiful. It was just an amazing thing. I never grieved my mother's loss because of seeing where she went and how happy she was. And I feel her around me all the time. She pops in every once in a while, like a megaphone, every once in a while to tell me something. And to help people with that, to help do away with that stigma of death and dying. We don't die, people. We shed our skin and we just go. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. We are energy. So when we leave, we got to go somewhere. But that's book number 3. My book number 4, 2 therapists came together. I was looking for a book for my own 14-year-old. Everything kind of ends at the birds and the bees and good touch and bad touch, and then picks up with human trafficking. But there's that gap in the middle. So I wrote a book called The Gap, What Else Your Adolescent and Teen Needs to Know. And it talks about everything from the first chapter is your privates. Okay, everything is, everything is gender neutral because of the new gender movement that's going through. The names are, names that can be used, Blake, for both boy or girl. And it was difficult writing it because it kept trying to put it in proper, in tense. But it talks about things like not going out on your first date with stinky sneakers, because no matter how pretty or handsome you are, there's nothing more dreadful than being stuck in a car with the windows up with somebody with stinky shoes. So, and it also talks about what to do if a condom breaks. Not that it's encouraging sex early. It does talk about setting good boundaries, what to say, so that you can save face with your friends and certain situations, making good choices with friends. that sort of thing. And like I said, even with your timing with sex. But if you do have a condom break, it tells you what you can do. And you don't need a prescription, and you don't need your parents' permission to get some of these things that you can do to correct that. There are 2 pills on the market that stop ovulation that people aren't aware of. It won't hurt a baby if a baby's already there. So it's not an abortion thing. It's a stopping ovulation just to make sure that children come into your life when you're ready. But it also talks about, it's got pictures of trunk releases from the inside, which people may not be aware of if ever they get abducted and stuck in a trunk, and where a tie iron is to hit somebody in the head when they open the trunk. So it's got a lot of things in it for that, and even like not putting your dishes away wet. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in there for life skills for them. And then my final book is also part of the Omnipresent series. It's called 111 Becadon Drive, which is the one about the townhouses that the naked ghost was going from townhouse to townhouse, crawling in bed with women and pulling down their underwear during the night. But I have a website, www.lynnmonet.com. You can find my books there. 3 of my books are also out on Amazon. Amazon kind of takes over those with Amazon. So if you purchase them through my website, you will get them signed by me. That's extra, and it doesn't cost, the cost is the same. So, it's not about the money. It's more about getting the information out there. But, it would be nice if it was personalized. So, definitely. And also there's a way to reach out to me on my website. There's a way to get to me, to me through email. Also,
like a contact tab or whatnot.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's omnipresent.the.book@gmail. So okay, that's omnipresent. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, we've got one called the Amazing Journey Through the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So this is how we came to the conclusion that the voices were not hallucinations. And it's all true story, historically, how step by step we came to that conclusion. You can get this through our website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We have a lot of information there. We have articles section. We have book recommendations. There's a lot of information on what you can do to help yourself with the voices.
Right.
And I have a private practice. You can reach me through my website also.
Fantastic.
There you go. And you can tune in Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 7 o'clock Central, to see more of Lynn and Dr. Jerry on Tuesday.
Right. This week, you're going to be on Synchronicity website, and that's spelled like synchronicity, or not website, but Synchronicity podcast, right? Just spelled Synchronicity?
Yes, Synchronicity, the next level paranormal.
The next level paranormal is the whole title. Okay.
Yes.
And I forgot we have this book translated into French, German, and Spanish at this point too.
That's beautiful.
There you go. Yeah, mine are also you can get a lot of mine in other languages as well. So we're good.
That's great. You both are a powerhouse. Just really like fantastic sources of information for all the listeners to look further and to see more. And hopefully there's future podcasts to come here on Wake the Dead with both of you. I'm always excited to speak with you. And thank you all for listening. And all those links that they spoke about, I'm going to have them there for you to click below. And please seek more, learn more. And thank you all for listening to another Wake the Dead.